The Pentagon has now completed the first Guantanamo Periodic Review Board and just added one more detainee, Mahmoud Mujahid, to the list of people approved to be released. In a press release, the board said they found that continued law of war detention is no longer necessary to protect against a continuing significant threat to the United States and that Mujahid is therefore eligible for transfer. Although he has been approved for release, it is unclear when and where Mujahid will be released. And to talk more about the Guantanamo Periodic Review Board, the military justice at the detention facility, I am joined now by Lieutenant Commander Kevin Bogucki. He has represented other detainees at Guantanamo Bay. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Perian.
Can you tell us a little bit more about Obama's Periodic Review Board? What is their purpose and what have they accomplished in regards to closing Gitmo?
Well, it's a great question. President Obama first came up with the concept, or I should say, first enacted the concept of the periodic review boards in March of 2011 with an executive order.
Right.
It then became part of our national law with the National Defense Authorization Act of 2012.
Okay.
Nonetheless, it took almost 2 years before the first periodic review board was actually held, which was held at the end of last year, 2013.
That's
and of course,
November, right?
That's right. And we just got the results of that first board just now. So a scheme that President Obama set in place in March of 2011 is only just starting to bear fruit. I will say that this result today is great news for Mr. Mujahid and for his lawyer, David Reams. But to some extent, it illustrates the continuing problem with Guantanamo Bay. Even though this periodic review board found that there's no need to continue to detain Mr. Mujahid at Guantanamo Bay, he now just shifts from a category of people who are being indefinitely detained, basically pending the end of the war on terror, to the category of people who are being indefinitely detained until we are comfortable enough with the diplomatic relations with Yemen to be able to transfer him.
Yeah, that's a whole nother issue, and it has been a very slow rollout. And his trial yesterday, it was conducted via video teleconference, and the board was located at a secret location in Washington, D.C., and the detainee and his attorney were in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. Further, the Pentagon said it was, quote, unprepared to let reporters watch, in which the Pentagon envoy for Guantanamo closures, Paul Lewis, was surprised to discover that detention center staff had no plans to accommodate the media for the hearings. Why the lack of transparency with this process?
The lack of transparency with the periodic review board process is exactly in line with the lack of transparency we've seen with everything related to Guantanamo, including the military commissions process, where we most recently litigated a motion arguing that the United States, pursuant to the International Convention Against Torture, cannot use classification to hide evidence of torture and human rights abuses, and yet we were shot down on that motion. And effectively, what the Commission said is that the government can continue to classify and make secret all the evidence regarding its human rights abuses and torture.
But even President Bush's military review panel allowed for the detainees to meet face-to-face with the board and allowed the press to watch. So other than the controversial treatments that we already know about at Gitmo, such as waterboarding, detaining teenagers, force feedings, and now we're hearing about the suicides, do you think this administration is hiding anything else there?
Well, that initial round of hearings, which were the combatant status review tribunals, those had a lot of problems too. While it's true that the detainees may have actually faced the members of the board, they weren't represented by lawyers. They were, as is true in this process, represented by non-lawyer personal representatives with whom they've established absolutely no relationship. So I wouldn't say that those hearings were fair. Those hearings were an attempt to retroactively correct a problem, which was that we didn't comply with the Geneva Conventions when we caught these people. We didn't give them the proper Article 5 tribunals they were entitled to determine what their status should be as combatants captured on the battlefield.
And as a member of the Navy's JAG and someone that has represented other detainees, why do you believe there's not a conflict of interest there?
No, there's no conflict of interest. When I was assigned to represent these men, which was now 5.5 years ago, my primary duty became their best interest. And I've fought hard for my clients over the course of those past 5 years. I've gone all around the world, actually, talking about how bad I think Guantanamo is, and all the problems with the military commissions system, all the problems with the periodic review board system, one of which I'll note, it was noted by the American Bar Association in July of last year that these men are not entitled to be represented by lawyers of their own choosing. I've formed close relationships with all my clients, but someone arbitrarily decided that Navy JAGs cannot have any role in this process, this periodic review board process. So these men with whom I've formed close relationships, I can't represent them in their periodic review boards. Instead, they'll be represented by non-lawyer personal representatives with whom they have no relationship.
Great, thank you so much. That was Kevin Bogucki of the U.S. Navy.
Thank you.